Have you ever heard someone say, "It's not that deep"? It's a phrase that seems to be popping up everywhere, especially among Gen Z. It's almost as if being curious is a bad thing now. I came across this fascinating video by a YouTuber named Selene, who pointed out a few problems with this trend. She argues that people use it as "not that deep" to dismiss things that actually have genuine depth. It discourages critical thinking, making us less likely to analyze what we read and watch. And it's used to shut down entire topics instead of exploring them. Now, has this phrase really caused a decline in critical thinking? That's a huge claim and probably impossible to prove, but you can't just ignore all the anecdotal evidence, especially when measuring something like this on a large scale is so tricky. Even if we just think about its impact on literature, do we really want to discourage people from engaging deeply with the books they read? But let's not jump to conclusions. It's easy to create a simple black and white picture. The deep thinkers versus the surface level readers. The reality is probably much more complicated. In fact, we might even learn something from the "it's not that deep" crowd. To figure this out, we first need to ask a fundamental question. What even is interpretation? This question about whether something is that deep is directly tied to what it means to interpret something. This is a massive field in philosophy and literary studies, so we're just going to scratch the surface today. Let's start by thinking about what makes literary interpretation different from other kinds of investigation. Why do people say it's not that deep about a novel, but you rarely hear them say it about a math problem or a scientific experiment? Let's take science, for example. When we observe the world and try to systematize those observations into laws or theories, what are we trying to do? Well, most would say we're trying to discover truths about the external world. But how do we know if a scientific theory is true? The standard answer is through observation and prediction. We test our theories against what we see. If a theory doesn't match our observations, we discard Italiano. As the philosopher C.S. Peirce pointed out, we don't choose what we perceive. Our perceptions are forced on us. If I put my hand in a fire, it's not up to me whether I feel heat. Of course, our perceptions can be influenced by our values and concepts, but they're stable and convergent enough for science to function and make progress. This stability makes it hard to read too much into scientific observations because we can all generally agree on what we were seeing. Interestingly, when science moves away from directly observable phenomena, you do start to hear things that sound a bit like it's not that deep. Take the famous physicist Arthur Symons. He used to warn his students not to get bogged down in the philosophical meaning of quantum physics. He wanted them to focus on the experimental results, not what the math really meant. So, scientific interpretation is anchored by these convergent observations. But what about literature? When we interpret a poem or a novel, what are we anchoring our interpretation to? Unlike measuring a table, there's no single, universally agreed upon thing to observe. If 1,000 people read the same poem, you'll get 1,000 different interpretations. There's no convergence. This is where things get interesting. Some people, called intentionalists, believe the correct interpretation is whatever the author intended. The meaning is fixed by the author's mental state when they wrote it. On this view, if you say the curtains in a book are blue just to describe the color, and someone else argues they symbolize the character's sadness, the intentionalist would say, "It's not that deep. You're wrong because the author didn't intend it." This seems to give us a solid anchor for meaning, just like in science. But this idea has some major problems. First, how do we ever truly know what an author intended? Many authors are no longer with us, and even if they were, they might not remember or be honest about their intentions. Should the meaning of a text change every time an author gives a new interview? It seems strange, and this brings us back to "it's not that deep." When someone says this, they could be coming from either of these camps. They might be an intentionalist, dismissing an interpretation because they believe the author didn't mean it. Or they might just feel an interpretation is too far-fetched and not well supported by the text, even from an anti-intentionalist perspective. So, maybe "it's not that deep" isn't just a dismissal of critical thought. Maybe it's a gut reaction to this fundamental problem of interpretation. It's a way of saying, your reading has come unmoored from the text. In science, our observations keep us grounded. In literature, the text itself is our only ground. When an interpretation seems to float too far away from the words on the page, people push back. The phrase might also be a reaction against a certain kind of academic analysis that can feel forced or elite. You know, The kind that finds complex symbolism in every single detail, sometimes to the point of absurdity. People might be pushing back against the idea that you need a special degree to understand a book, and reclaiming their right to just enjoy a story for what it is. And honestly, there's a valid point there. Not every detail in a story is a deep, hidden symbol. Sometimes, the curtains are just blue, and insisting that everything must have a profound meaning can actually ruin the simple pleasure of reading. It turns a story into a puzzle to be solved, rather than an experience to be lived. So, where does that leave us? On one hand, dismissing all deep analysis with "it's not that deep" is a problem. It closes doors to understanding and enrichment. It can stifle curiosity and prevent us from seeing the incredible layers of meaning that artists put into their work. We shouldn't discourage people from engaging deeply with art. But on the other hand, the "it's not that deep" crowd has a point. They remind us that interpretation needs to stay connected to the text. They challenge us to justify our readings and not get lost in abstract theories that have little to do with the actual story. They also champion the idea that art can be enjoyed on its own terms, without the need for a complex analytical framework. Perhaps the best approach is a middle ground. We should encourage deep, critical engagement with art, but also recognize when an interpretation is stretching the bounds of plausibility. We should value both the rich, symbolic readings and the straightforward enjoyment of a good story. It's not a binary choice between deep analysis and surface-level reading. It's about finding the right balance. The next time you hear someone say, "it's not that deep," maybe don't just dismiss them as anti. Instead, see it as an invitation to a conversation. Ask them why they think that. What part of the interpretation feels disconnected from the text? You might find that the discussion leads to a richer understanding for everyone involved. It's not about shutting down analysis, but about keeping it honest and grounded. After all, the goal is to connect more deeply with the art we love, and there are many ways to do that. Thanks so much for watching. What do you think about all this? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. See you next time.